There we see the pituitary gland lying directly in what? The hypophyseal fossa. And we see above it what? The optic chiasma. Alright? And what structure lies right posterior to the optic chiasma? Anyone? What structure is right behind the optic chiasma? Just coming down like a rope, right down behind the optic chiasma. The infundibular stalk. The infundibular stalk. What's lying right above it is the third ventricle, the floor of the third ventricle. So on either side we'll find here the cavernous sinus. And where I want to show you these things especially here are the cranial nerve. What's going to be directly inferior? What lies just below now the pituitary? William, what is directly below the pituitary? What is going to lie directly below it? What's the anterior inferior relation of the pituitary gland? This sphenoidal ear sinus. Okay? Directly inferior will be the what? The sphenoidal ear sinus. Okay. What can you tell me about the sphenoidal ear sinus? Anyone? Supposing they put a thing in there, if it's nerve supply, a little of this, that, and the other about it. What's the nerve which supplies the sphenoidal ear sinus? By the way, what's the relation of the sphenoidal ear sinus with the pituitary gland? Anterior and inferior. Conversely, the pituitary is posterior and superior to it. Okay. Now, what's the nerve supply to that sphenoidal ear sinus? Anyone? And that is by the posterior ethmoidal nerve. Alright. Now, what is going to lie directly lateral to the pituitary gland is what? The cavernous sinus. Okay? The cavernous sinus is lying directly lateral to it. Now, talk to me a little about the cavernous sinus. Because when we discuss the pituitary gland, the major discussion is relating to the what? To the cavernous sinus. William, how do you subdivide the pituitary gland? Give me the major subdivisions of the pituitary. No, sir, not superficial and deep. Who am I dealing with here? Shakira. Major subdivisions of the pituitary. Okay, it has what's called an adenohypophysis and a neurohypophysis. An adenohypophysis and a neurohypophysis. Where's the neurohypophysis coming from? What is it? Kathy, what is it? A downgrowth of the floor of the third ventricle. The adenohypophysis is developing from a structure called whose pouch? Rathke's pouch. Okay? And ascending from the roof of the stomadeum. Okay. So there will be an anterior pituitary and a posterior pituitary. Posterior pituitary is, what's another name for the posterior pituitary? The neurohypophysis or the pars nervosa. The pars nervosa. The anterior part is known as what, Shakira? Distalis. The pars distalis. And then the structure that surrounds the infundibulum is called what? The pars tuberalis. And then between the distalis and the nervosa is what structure? The pars intermedia. Very good. Now, the cavernous sinus. Let us get on to a discussion of the cavernous sinus. First of all, one, it is the largest dural venous sinus. Okay? What does it contain? What does it contain? One, okay, so it contains the internal carotid artery. Okay, so we're just relaxing here. Okay, and this is the internal carotid artery right here. Okay, so there we can see the internal carotid artery just ascending up in the neck. If that's the internal carotid artery, then which is this boy? You're not responsible for this boy yet, you know, but let me see if you're doing any reading. Hot. Very good, that is the vertebral artery. Very good. So that's excellent. That is the what? The vertebral artery. Carotid artery has how many parts to it? 4. Where does it begin and where does it end? So the internal carotid artery begins and ends where? Begins at either at the level of C3 or C4, just below the hyoid bone, or between the superior horn of the thyroid cartilage and the hyoid bone. So right in the neck. Begins between the level of what? C3 and C4. Where does it end? It ends at the anterior perforated substance, dividing into its terminal branches, which are the, I think I showed this circle of Willis last time. Right? So terminal branches being the anterior cerebral and the middle. Has 4 parts. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 in the neck, the cervical part. 2, where it's going to travel through what? Very good, through the petrosal. So you can get this in the exam. That's that. Pass it around. So this is called the carotid canal. And that opening is known as the external opening of the carotid canal. Okay? So the internal carotid artery is going to pass through the petrous temporal bone. Reasonable? So 1, cervical. 2, petrous. And then after it leaves the petrous bone, it then becomes what? The cavernous part, where it is now in the cavernous sinus. And that is the inferior hypophyseal artery. So they have the sections of the cavernous part, and remember that the part of the branch that comes off is the what? Shakira, the what? The inferior hypophyseal artery, which is going to supply what? Is the pars nervosa. Okay, supplies the pars nervosa. So as the artery is passing by, it gives supply to the pars nervosa. How is the pars distalis supplied with blood? Rosie, how is the anterior pituitary getting its blood? The portohypophyseal system. The portohypophyseal system. Alright. So the internal carotid artery has 4 parts. 1, cervical. 2, petrous. 3, cavernous. 4, cerebral or supraclinoid. And the 4th part gives rise to the terminally the anterior cerebral and the middle. But then now, just before it terminally divides, it's going to give rise to a number of branches. You can write a whole chapter on the number of branches that come off. But the only one that interests you is what? The superior hypophyseal artery. That superior hypophyseal artery is heading towards what structure? And goes in and gets into what structure? The median eminence, where it breaks down into a capillary plexus. And we said what's distinctive about that capillary plexus of the median eminence? No blood-brain barrier. Absence of the blood-brain barrier. Where else is absent? Where is the blood-brain barrier also absent? The pineal, and where else? Which is the area in the brain that needs to be detecting any toxic material, especially in the stomach, in the GI tract. Area postrema. You've done that in physiology, yes or no? No. No, man, you've done it. Professor Lorian Young says you don't do it, and she's telling you that's not true at all.
She's not.
See the area postrema right here?
What is that?
That's in the floor of the 4th ventricle of the brain. The area what? Postrema. And that is known as what center? The chemoemetic center. Right? So that will initiate reverse peristalsis. That is the chemoemetic center. And it lacks what? It lacks the blood-brain barrier. The area postrema. Right? So there's some very, very important areas in the floor of the 4th ventricle, and one is the area postrema.